Thank you, Natalie. As she just said, we will now take your questions. We would ask you if you would please try to use the microphones that are near your seat. Not so much for us here in the room, but just to help those that are joining now on the live stream on YouTube. We have opened up this morning's press conference for the farmers in Arla across Europe, and also pleased to have journalists joining in from other countries as well. Cameras will stay on our spokesperson, so you don't have to worry about trending on YouTube if you ask a question. But just give me a signal if you want to ask a question, and if you're given the word, if you could just state your name and your media, that would be helpful to the spokespeople. So with that, we'll now take your questions. Jakob.
Hi, Jacob from Reuters. A couple of questions on the drought. What are the sort of financial consequences of the drought on your farmers, and what is sort of the situation around potential bankruptcies among your owners, and more broadly on climate change? How do you expect climate change to impact your business going forward, both your farmers' performance and your own performance?
I can begin, and thereafter I think Natalie can take over. On farm level, there are big differences how it has interrupted our farms at home. The drought was very, very hard in Sweden, I can say for sure. I visited Sweden the 2nd of July. It was open eye for me to see what happened in Sweden at this time. And also in our Central European areas, we have some difficulties to have the right feed on the farms just now. And as you can see, the milk intake from Central Europe went down just now. It's decreasing. But we have other areas, and in Denmark, you can say we have our increase of milk production also in this year. Not as much as proposed or what farmers have decided at their farms, but there are big differences. And therefore, I'm also very proud to, with the good cash flow we have in Arla Foods, our good balance sheet, this year to pay out the whole net profit from 2008 to our farmers, to help them, to ensure they have the best situation at farms and can be a part of the future also. But naturally, the financial impact on Arla Foods.
More of also financial impact of farmers.
Yeah.
I think that's what he was looking for, yeah. So I think you've answered the question. Did you get what you needed? I think he spoke about the impact on farmers.
Maybe I can add to that. If you look at the milk price from Arla Foods, but also in general from Europe, the milk price at the level we have now is actually a sound and pretty okay milk price. What of course is disturbing on the farm level at the moment, especially in the Q4 and as we speak, are higher feed prices. That of course comes from the drought situation. That is expected to level out and become, given the weather, of course, more normalized as we go into later into the spring. Well, we will be announcing anytime soon, certainly not today, but rather soon, a very broad-scoped sustainability package where we are looking into the future. Both Jan and I are, and our vice chairman in Sweden are attending an event that we are planning at the moment, where we are talking about what we can do in order to become more sustainable through the entire value chain of Arla Foods, including on farm level. And that actually can we see because our farmers have since 1990 actually improved significantly, for example, their CO2 output. I think it's 23 or 24%. Which is pretty cool to think about, something that we probably haven't advertised too much, but we will do now. When we then look at how that impacts the bottom line, there's a direct link. The more sustainable you are, the more efficient you are. And it's about resource and how you spend your resources, of course. So working with sustainability is actually, from a financial profitable point of view, also on farm level, a very, very good idea. And there's proof for the last generation that that's how it is.
Gustav, här till.
David Gustafsson from ATL, the farmers' business newspaper in Sweden. The summer of 2018 was extreme weather-wise. How well equipped are you today to tackle a new extreme summer like that again when you hand out the entire profit to your owners?
I meant to have said it early today. This situation where we pay out the whole entire profit for 2008, we can do it again. It's very, very important to have a very strong Arla Foods for the future and ensure the farmers they can deliver the milk they like to deliver to Arla Foods, and we can add value to the milk and bring it to the customers and consumers. And this way be the right partner for our members to deliver the milk. And therefore it's the one time we do here. It's only because we have the real strong position in our balance sheet here in 2018 we can do this.
But was it a requirement from your owners to hand out the whole?
I can say we was in a situation where the board, when we have our half-year report back in August, look at our balance sheet. And then we acknowledge we was good, in good space, and we have a good balance sheet, strong balance sheet, maybe a little stronger than it's okay to have a little less. And therefore this is one time we can help our farmers through a situation where some of them have very big difficulties with the outcome of the drought. And therefore it's a one-timer for sure.
When do you think you will pass your one more question?
Can I add
Yes.
to that? I can tell you that the chairman called me this summer in a very private conversation and said, I've been thinking about something, Peter. Can we, the two of us, have a discussion about how our balance sheet is developing? Because I would like to propose something for the board. So the idea started and it was initiated by the chairman.
One last question. When do you think you will pass your revenue record from 2016 at 10.6 billion euro, I think it was?
It can be next year, but listen up. I don't think that the revenue as such is a target. It is a mix of the profitability of what we are doing. But of course, at the moment with the level of input from the farmers, we are seeing around between 0 and 2% growth in the various countries. A higher revenue would indicate better prices from the world markets, and that's also what Natalie was alluding to, that we are seeing a firm market at the moment with a slight positive tone to it, and that could bring us in that area, but it's not a target in itself, it's the price to the farmers that is most important. And here the cost element is evenly important, I can tell you.
Lars Atrup, Jyllands-Posten Finans. What has been the total currency effect in 2018?
So if you look at the top line, it's about 200 million, and at the bottom line, it's a bit less than 50 million, both negative effects.
Maybe I should just clarify on that. So the 50 million on the bottom line comes on top of the 150 that was already there in the end of 2017. So we are now getting close to around 200 million in effects, mainly from the pound.
I don't know how big you are in China, but how are sales progressing in China? Do you see any effect of sort of the economic slowdown, any effect on private consumption in China?
I think if you look at China, our retail and food service business is about 100 million euros. And you saw when I was presenting the numbers, it's actually down a little bit in terms of 2018. That's not because of consumption, that's just because of the regulatory approval process on the infant nutrition. We expect that to be resolved very quickly so that in 2019 you will see it growing, and that does mirror the consumption trends that are happening in that market.
So no effect sort of on private consumption of the stagnating economy?
Let me have Peter add something.
No, I think the Chinese market is an enormous market, right? It's the biggest dairy market in the world, despite the consumption per capita is at the very low end. And that is developing, of course, at a slower rate than the fantastic double-digit rates that we saw just a few years ago. But it is actually, dairy is actually, coming more and more into the households. So that's good to see. The import of both commodities as well as finished goods, so retail products to China is still growing. Especially in the area of infant formula, where the Chinese have a preference, and you can see that from the prices that they are willing to pay for as well. And our own Baby and Me Organic, which is probably the most expensive product in China at the moment, is growing significantly. We are close to 100% in growth. But of course, coming from a very small scale, so there is a growing economy around dairy, which is interesting. It isn't booming as it did years ago, but it's still very sound and great. And then it's interesting to see how the Chinese are also starting to understand the different types of products and milk and qualities, and we have seen that organic has come from being kind of a backstage product to being coming into the retail market all over the place, especially in the cities, and that's an interesting development.
How will Brexit affect your British members and their deliveries and your business in UK? What's your analysis?
Well, so far you can see that Arla Foods in the UK at the moment is, in terms of milk price, very competitive, and we've been that throughout the year. What will happen in terms of various Brexit scenarios here on the 29th of March or whenever the D-Day is set to be, who knows? That remains to be seen. It would be speculation now because the outcome can be, it can be a boy, it can be a girl, it can be an old and a young person. Who knows what the politicians will agree on? The only thing that we hope of is that they come to their senses. We are a strong believer in open markets. So that's just how it is. We think that it would be of a disadvantage for any industry on both sides of the channel, so to speak, whether you're in Europe or you're in Britain, whether you're in dairy or you're in car industry. It will be devastating to have and the uncertainty of having a Brexit without any agreement is not good for any industry.
And how will it affect the milk price, you think? A hard Brexit, for example.
It can affect the milk price for sure, but we will not speculate on that today. We know how various scenarios can play out and are making our mitigation, but we have decided not to be part of the scaring committee trying to scare people to mean this or that. But we are having conversations, of course, with our farmers, definitely on the board level, and we will also speak to each other at the BOR meeting that is coming up anytime soon, how we see the future. But that's for that process.
You mentioned the anti-dairy movement in Sweden. How do you see that evolving maybe into other countries? How could that impact your business?
Maybe I could start and then Natalie can continue. But there's no doubt that what we are seeing in Sweden is a rather tough environment on that subject, and something that we don't see at quite the same level in other countries, for sure. We see elements of the same thing. So we see, oat drinks coming up, and it's forbidden to say oat milk because it is not by law a milk. So you can see oat drinks and other types of drinks coming up, alongside with milk and other types of, water and soft drinks and whatever. And of course, the share of stomach is then being challenged, and we see that especially in Sweden. What I really don't like is is when this is about milk against something else. There is no scientific provement of that. It's pure perception. But of course, milk and any other drink out there should welcome new exciting products on the shelf. And we are, by the way, also today selling products in that category, and we will also be selling a few more. So this is, how we drive our business. So it's not that we are shy of also understanding this consumption pattern. You see that in Sweden also.
I think the one thing I might add to that is that if you look at what's happening there, what we see is that it tends to be very heavily focused on white milk. And so we actually gain when you look at our cheese categories, because as people are moving out of meat consumption, they're moving into more products that are, flexitarian or other alternatives. And for us, an example in Sweden where we did have challenges in the white milk, we had, all-time high market shares in terms of cheese, because we see people really moving more actively into those categories as well.
Yeah, but your partnership with Starbucks, I just wanted to ask how big is it? How important is it to your business? What types of margins does it bring? And is it essential for a company the size of yours to have such partnerships with these famous brands?
So Starbucks is a really great partnership for us that's been growing at double digits for the last several years. It's one of the key components of our milk-based beverages area, but when you look at it, it's still definitely not the majority of that business. We also are growing our own milk-based beverages very strongly too, and I think you'll see that trend continue. But it is something where we have margins that are far superior to most of our products, and it's a place where we see great growth opportunities, not only in the established markets, but also as we move into the Middle East and in some of our other emerging markets.
Maybe one final question on food waste. Lots of talk about food waste these days. How are you coping with that? How much food do you waste? Do you have any such numbers? What can be done in your company to tackle this? Thanks.
We have the numbers, but I would rather be rather precise so we can get them afterwards. One of the key components of the calcium program is actually to target. It's one of the big components to target waste throughout production. So from milk intake until the product leaves our facilities, and that is a number that is interesting to target, and we are seeing significant progress. Actually, this year it's one of the things that we had success with in 2018, and will continue. I think that food waste plays out very differently in different parts of the world. Waste in the food production in the third world countries mostly happen on farm level. You see less of that in Europe, where the dominant part of waste is actually in the consumption end, so by the consumer. Which means also that we have been working actually for years now on developing packagings that are for the famous yogurt, where it's hard to get the last part out of it. So we are working with different types of coating and different types of packaging to make sure that everything that's in the carton gets out and is not wasted. That is in the Western world one of the biggest issues that where the waste actually is, and that's also where we have done most. Now we are also targeting it through the production from an efficiency point of view, but most of the waste in the Western world actually is at home by the consumer due to packaging and other issues.
We'll get you some specific numbers as well to add to that. Dorte?
You sold out Rinkeby for a couple.
Excuse me, it was Dorte here from Landbrugsavisen.
Oh, sorry.
First. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yep, Dorte, Landbrugsavisen. What are your expectations for calcium this year?
We've put those out at 75 to 100 million euros, and that's something that will get us right to the kind of strategic midpoint in terms of the program.
And Etienne?
You sold out Rinkeby a couple of years ago to mainly That's my view. Focusing on your milk lines and production, and one could argue that maybe you need to add more business areas to be more competitive, like Tine, for example. What's your thoughts on that? Do you need to add more business areas to be more competitive?
No. We believe that when you are on the global market, which Tine is not to the same extent, I have to say, but they are having a different market universe in Norway, so I understand what they're doing. On the global market, this is about being super efficient on your branding, super sharp on your branding, super efficient in the whole value chain, and making sure that you have enough money to invest in order to be super efficient in your chosen brands and your chosen categories. And we believe that the worst thing that you can do actually is to broaden your profile into other categories. I've heard people talk about, should we get into meat or fish or other kinds of things. That is the recipe, a recipe which is deadly, and I haven't seen any company being successful in that.
And how come it's deadly? Can you develop on that a bit?
Well, we are spending 460 million euros this year on our dairy plants. If we had other categories alongside of it, that number would probably be much bigger. 1, 2, we would need to run different branding strategies alongside of it. Even on a global scale, it would really be super complex. And we saw those dyssynergies in terms of Rynkeby, and that's why we sold it, that the dyssynergies in running, and actually we were not the right owner, simply because, the requirement of our dairy operation is for investments all through the value chain, so upstream and downstream, is just increasing every year, as in other dairy companies, and that's why we need to focus. And basically we see that those dairy companies in our industry who are successful are those who are focusing, and those who are, if they are on the global scale. If you are very local, then of course you can have different platforms, but it becomes super costly on a global scale if you spread your activities.
So no acquisition plans for 2019?
Yes, we've just bought, as you know, a very big entity, but it's in the dairy area in the Middle East. We don't disclose the price, but it's one of the biggest M&As that we have done at all. But it is within our focus areas. It's on target, it's on strategy, and it's not exploring big-time adjacent categories or other industries. That would be very wrong.
We have.
Just building on that, I think the comment when you look at where is diversification possible, it's not different categories. I think it is those international markets. If you look at what we expect in the next 10 years, you're going to see 90% of growth happening outside of Europe, and so that's actually where you see our growth efforts going.
The relationship between the fat and the protein price has been a problem for you. Now that the milk powder stocks are gone, is the problem gone?
Yes, one should hope. And what you see is that the skim milk prices are slowly starting to recover. So they're going in the right direction. But if it continues at the current speed, with going upwards, it's going to take 3 or 4 years before we are where we were. Okay. So we'll need to see some more speed in that development, so to speak. And I think you will see some changes. But for now, we can see that there is a slight positive direction in the right direction. Whilst at the same time, the butter prices and fat prices are almost keeping up their current level, which is rather interesting. And it's the combination of butter and skim that creates a milk price. If you are only in that area, we are in many other areas. Back to your question. And so the level of skim and butter is becoming competitive again in the coming months, we are seeing. But we are some years ahead from being back where we came from.
There's been a decline in the milk volumes in Sweden for some years now. I think annual 2 to 3%. Can this continue? And what are you doing to if you're interested in changing this.
I think that the drop that you've seen this year, and coming back to what the chairman alluded to, I actually spoke about, there's no doubt that the drought played out, if at any country in Europe, most harsh and difficult in Sweden. So I actually think that the numbers that you are seeing there actually suggest that. And then you're right, if you look back over the years, there has been a slight decline in Sweden year on year. Now that has something to do with the structure in Sweden, that there are relatively many smaller farmers vis-à-vis bigger farmers, but that structure is gradually year on year changing, as we see actually in any other country. So it's the same development, structural development you're seeing. It's just coming from a little bit from some years behind in Sweden. And if that plays out so purely statistically, then you will see 3, 4, 5 years from now that the growth will start to mirror what you see in Sweden, simply because the smaller farmers will have relatively less impact vis-à-vis the bigger farmers who become bigger. And it is something that you saw in Denmark if you go back into the 90s as well.
So you expect that the milk volumes will increase again in Sweden?
Eventually, statistically, it will happen, but due to the reasons that I just mentioned to you, and it's pure statistics, you can see that, and you can see it. It happened in Denmark before. You've seen it happening in other markets. It's simply the ratio between smaller farmers and bigger farmers, where the smaller farmers have a tendency to close, where the larger farmers stay on and become bigger. And that ratio is changing, and at a certain point in time, the bigger farmers will share-wise take over the national growth. But we are some years ahead from that.
How does it affect your current business that the milk volumes have been declining over so many years?
Well, we are dealing with it, and you can see that we year on year are making efficiencies and adjusting our production platform to that. Bear in mind that we are servicing the Swedish market with all the milk that we have, and we have even more. So we're also exporting out of Sweden, mostly commodities. So what basically is happening is that we are taking from the commodity end simply because we are servicing the Swedish market, and we have plenty of milk to do that in Sweden. So the Swedish consumers will not run out of Swedish products from Arla Foods, I can tell you that.
We have time for one more question here before we wrap up the plenary session and break into one-to-one interviews. And Ethel, you have the final question.
As we mentioned before, you didn't reach your record 10.6 billion from 2006. Did you save enough money? Are you happy with your cost savings for 2018? What's your comments on that?
Well, as Natalie said, we are not only happy, we are super happy. So it's 3 times, our cost savings is 3 times higher than we thought it would be in the beginning of the year. So as a CEO, I have to salute the organization and say, job well done.
And are you happy with your peer group performance as well?
As I said before, the peer group performance cannot be measured now simply because we are the first ones with the annual accounts, so I can be guessing. But I can tell you that from our internal studies that we have significantly improved our peer performance, which was absolutely not where we wanted it to be by the end of 2017 and the beginning of the first quarter. So we have made improvements. We can see that in our prepaid milk price, if you study that market by market. And let's see how the other companies plan out when they come with their annual accounts. And they'll be doing that during the course of the next 2 months.
So your Good Growth 2020 program is developing well, or?
Let me say it this way. If we had not had the effects of currencies from Brexit, and basically also lately Sweden, but effects from currencies and Brexit, Arla Foods would have had all-time high relative performance. That goes beyond doubt. So the underlying business, growing our brands, moving our efficiencies in the right direction, is performing right on target, on strategy, to the comma, and almost to the high end of the comma. So I'm happy about that. But we just have significant headwinds from external factors, Brexit being the most dominant one from the currencies. And that's just how life is, which means that it's good that the company underneath is performing very well. And again, I just salute the employees for that.
Thank you. With respect to your deadlines and the one-to-one interviews that you have requested, we will conclude the plenary part now. Thank you to those of you here in the room, and thank you to those watching on the live stream. We will now break into individual interviews. So thank you.